can go to Skype, your choice.
I'm okay either way. You tell me what you would rather, as long as you're comfortable. So,
Um, let's. I just sent you. Let's switch over to Skype, and I'll call you on that right now.
okay, sounds good.
All right.
All right, Steve. All right, so we're gonna do Skype here, folks. And here we go. See, I told you I wasn't gonna give up. All right, so he's gonna call me on that, I guess, or I could call him. Well, we'll see what happens. Folks, anyways, the call-in number, 803-392-4566, when we take calls. Now, listen, with guests like this, we usually will take a call after the next break. All right? So let's get back to it here. All right, Steve, I think we're good.
Yes.
Oh, that sounds fine. All right. Well, welcome aboard. I thank you for taking time out to be with us tonight. I know a lot of people are looking forward to hearing you on these issues tonight. So thank you for joining us.
Yes, indeed. I've been on a number of times, and it's always good to be with you and inform your audience of what's happening.
Well, thank you. I guess I'll start with, I don't think you really need to give an extensive background. If anybody doesn't know, then they haven't been paying attention. So I'll say this. So far, there has been no exposure there's been no disclosure, is what I'm trying to say, so far in this whole government scoop. So I guess, will it ever happen is the question, and where are we with all of this?
Well, disclosure, as we're seeking it as the advocacy movement, is a formal announcement from the president. It's a really big deal.
Well, yeah.
It's a huge deal, and that hasn't happened yet. But a great deal of progress is being made in putting pressure on political figures and political media to take all this to the next level, or keep taking to higher levels, because it's already advanced to a couple of higher levels. And so we're making progress. There is a huge amount going on around the world and in the United States. We've got just constant coverage of every little thing that happens. You're seeing that online, particularly in Facebook, also Twitter, as well as websites and internet news.
Mm-hmm.
Any little artifact, anything that looks interesting on the moon or Mars, any statement from any potential witness or past witness. Of course, sightings continue to take place, and now they're constantly being put up on the web, oftentimes with video. You've got whistleblowers, or not whistleblowers, we've got witnesses emerging. Some of them I think are real, some of them are essentially having some fun.
Yeah.
But it's constantly in the news. And then over the last 14 months, we've had more political coverage of this issue than in the previous 60 years. So there is a great deal happening. This issue is, if anything, not going away. It's growing all the time. So this is heading ultimately to one place. At some point, it's just going to overwhelm the truth embargo in one form or fashion, and create a circumstance where the president really has to disclose. Though in order to do that, he's going to have to come to an understanding with the Pentagon, which has shut the presidents out on this issue now for quite a while.
I was going to say, wouldn't he need permission to do that? I mean, he could. Wouldn't he be? I mean, if he just come out and did it, I mean, he might end up like Kennedy.
I don't know about that, but permission's not the right word. The president theoretically can make the announcement any time without asking permission from anyone. I have no doubt that Obama knows there's an ET presence. I don't think he's been briefed by anyone in the military intelligence community, but that you don't have to be briefed.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how much would he actually know, being that a president might be there for 4 to 8 years? So I'm guessing that they try not to give him the whole scoop, although some presidents probably have gotten the whole scoop, right?
Not lately. But understand that there's enough evidence and information in the public domain to confirm the ET presence. You don't have to get it from the CIA.
Oh yeah, they don't have to tell
Pentagon.
me. I know.
Right. So the point is, I have no doubt that he knows that. But The problem he faces, if the Pentagon is not on board, if they're not going to be cooperative, and the president were to move on this issue, it would create a real potential problem. He's got to know he's got the backing of the military intelligence, even though he's their boss, and even though any problems they raise would be a significant constitutional question. I mean, the last thing we need is for the disclosure event to be mixed up with, at the same time, with a huge constitutional crisis in the country. And so, as a matter of simple logic and national security, it's best that the president and the Pentagon be on the same page, and they're not on the same page now. And so, what has to happen is that circumstance, unless they out of the goodness and of their heart and the wisdom that they possess, go ahead and work this out without any pressure, without any being prompted. We got to put enough pressure on them. They have no other option but to do that. That's what's going on right now, and there is a great deal happening. As I say, and now for your listeners, many of which I'm sure are in front of a computer while they listen to this, they need, if they want to follow this or get a great deal of information, they need to go to paradigmresearchgroup.org. You can find that site if you can't spell paradigm, just Google my name, Stephen Bassett. It comes up in the Google terms. But you go there, and then there's 4 links there. One is a support link for PRG. The middle link takes you to the Rockefeller Initiative documents and a huge amount of information about the Rockefeller Initiative, which is the linchpin to all of this. And then the bottom link takes you to the Congressional Hearing Political Initiative status, where you can see scores of articles that have been printed, published from mainstream publications since November of 2014. And that's not all. That's just a sampling, but it's a decent sampling, as well as a list of all PRG's media appearances, such as this one, and press releases and so forth. There's also the most important articles are highlighted with graphic links. There's just a lot there. And by perusing that page, a person can start to see that something very unusual is going on here, that we're moving towards some sort of understanding. Now, it's important that this happened during this election, and in spite of all the work that we've done so far, none of the networks or the cable, regular networks and cable networks, have seen fit to bring the issue up to any of the, well, so far in total, a lot have dropped out, but I think in total there's been something like 27 people that were, involved in debates on television for the presidential nomination on the Republican and Democratic side, and none of the debate venues have deemed it worthy of asking them about this ET issue, even though there are articles pouring out about it related to one of the chief candidates, and that's Secretary Hillary Clinton. So in the 20 years that I've been in this work, one thing I've learned is the most compromised segment of the media on the issue is public broadcasting. In other words, PBS and NPR. They do absolutely nothing. Yeah. It's as if it doesn't exist. They have no courage here at all. They're compromised. Right after that, the second most compromised and most ineffective are the 3 networks and the 3 cable networks, prominent cable networks. They have done very little. And given the amount of money and investment they have in their news operations, because PBS and NPR are limited, but these networks have huge sums. Their failure is worse in that regard, but they have done some things. PBS, NPR have done anything. So I'm not surprised that these networks, which are pretty much in the tank on the truth embargo, have not yet, in spite of all of the media coverage that's raining down around them, feel like, this issue is not worthy of candidates wanting to be the president of the United States to have to speak to. Well, they're wrong, and they will ultimately be extremely embarrassed by this and have to answer for it, assuming anybody cares about them anymore. But you got to care about them now because that's where all the debates are. There's 2 town halls tonight. One is on MSNBC, the Democrats, and one is on CNN, the Republicans. And so you can't just ignore these channels, pretend they're not important. They have been the principal debate venues.
Oh, I promise you, I have been keeping up with it all, even more so than ever in the past. I think this is the most important election we might have in our lifetimes.
It has the potential to be extremely important. Yeah. At the same time, it's one of the most ridiculous and embarrassing political campaigns, collectively overall.
Well, it has been a circus. That it has. But I haven't heard any of the candidates talking about the UFO phenomena or extraterrestrials. I think Hillary Clinton said she wanted to get to the bottom of the mystery, but then, if you really believe her, then, she probably already knows whatever needs to be known, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, no, she doesn't. But look, that was a non-trivial thing. So if your listeners are at the Paradigm Research Group page and they have clicked on that bottom link to go over to the political media coverage, they will see, among other things, that starting in November 24th of 2014, the Washington Times published an article, Activist Demands Congressional Action on Aliens of the Extraterrestrial Time. They followed that up on January 20 with another article, Lobbyist Buzzes Washington Over Extraterrestrials and Government Truth Embargo. Then Riot.org on Feb 17th of last year published an article, Obama's top political advisor wants to tell the world about UFOs. Huffington Post published the very same day, outgoing Obama advisor John Podesta has UFO regrets. Then Roll Call magazine jumped in, Roll Call newspaper, which is one of the Capitol Hill newspapers, read by everybody, and in virtually every office on Capitol Hill, published an extensive, heavily linked article called UFO Activists to Capitol Hill Beam Me Up. New York Magazine followed up on the 24th, the next day. When will presidential 2016 candidates discuss the extraterrestrial issue? Notice they said extraterrestrial issue, not UFO issue.
Yeah.
Then a major article by Mother Jones on March the 3rd of last year regarding the issue, heavily linked. This is a progressive magazine, well known to everybody on the left. The New Republic on July the 16th, the extraterrestrial vote. Then the Huffington Post comes back with an article on August 31st. Even UFOs are following Trump, despite being undocumented aliens. A little fun, serious article. Then Roll Call follows up with another article on September the 3rd. UFO activists determined to inject extraterrestrials into the 2016 race. New York Observer, a publication in New York, respected weekly up there, September 16th. Meet the Lobbyist. Let me just bring that up just a little bit.
Okay.
Hang on. It says, Meet the Lobbyist that pressuring the U.S. government to disclose extraterrestrial activity. Washington Post, full frontal page, virtually huge article on the style section front page. UFO truthers want to make Roswell an issue for 2016. Meet the Lobbyist. Then the New Republic it mentioned this in January 4th of this year, followed by another New York Observer article, January 16th. Extraterrestrial lobbyist explains Hillary Clinton's controversial UFO statements. And then the Washington Times follows up on January the 4th with a campaign promise. Hillary Clinton campaign promise. Hillary Clinton vows to, I think, investigate Area 51 and the alien visitors. Vows to. This is a bad headline. They actually screwed up on it. This is a typo in their own headline. But a campaign promise. Hillary vows to investigate Area 51. Hillary Clinton, then the Washington Times. Another one. 13 days later, Hillary Clinton and the UFOs, Part 2. The Daily Star does an article. in the UK, January 19th, 2016, the year the world will be told the truth about the existence of aliens. Daily Mirror in the UK, January 26th, CIA reveals the truth is out there in series of new UFO articles. Then a major article in Vice magazine, it's Vice magazine on the internet. This is Vice, a new and very, very heavily funded $4 billion investigative journalistic venue, an alien hunter's guide to the 2016 election. Article in the Independent in the UK, January 27th. CIA releases secret files of flying saucers, UFO sightings, including over Britain. That has to do with the CIA file release. And then Roll Call comes in with another major article on February the 11th. Lynn Woolsey doesn't find UFO talk totally spacey. But this is actually a much more serious article than that headline implies. And that had a lot of links in it. Now, that's Roll Call newspaper. This is read all over the Hill. So everybody on the Hill knows that this media coverage is happening, knows that this issue is in play, and nevertheless, the networks continue to try to pretend that there is simply nothing going on, which is just gross negligence and incompetence and a throwing of their journalistic ethics to the wind, if they ever had any, to begin with. All right. So, and then, oh, by the way, yesterday, another significant article was published in the Mother Jones magazine, and that's in the print version this time, and it will be up on the web shortly. And this is like 2-page article, significant. And let me get the title on that just a second. E.T. Oh, wait a minute. That's not the name of the article. Just a second. Let me just back up here. That's a tweet that was done on it. Here we go. This is another second article by A.J. Vicens, and it's called Take Me to Your Leader, E.T. Phone Dome. And again, it's about the work of PRG and the advocacy on the Hill. In the meantime, tweets are raining down on all of the media. We have like a list of 400 and some Twitter handles for virtually all the political media operating out of Washington, New York. And they've been getting tweets from many, many sources with links to all of this. And of course, that includes NBC, ABC, NBC, CNN, MSNBC. So it's just everywhere. And so at some point, the networks, which are controlling the debates, are going to finally have to yield to this. And they're going to bring this issue. And the issue is going to be brought into the campaign regarding Hillary Clinton. That is where the entrance point is.
How come
her involvement in the Rockefeller Initiative.
How come they've waited this long, though? I mean, they're kind of running out of time. If they're going to bring it up, they better do it soon, right? I mean, well, then again, they might have another dozen debates.
Oh, there will be. No, there are quite a few more debates, and town hall is coming. And there's still 8 months to the election. It's probably the more important deadline is the nominating conventions in July. This issue needs to get out before those nominating conventions, or it's going to get increasingly awkward for particularly Secretary Clinton and in general the rest of the candidates. So the networks have been the most, as I say, second most compromised segment of the media on the ET issue. In other words, they just went in the tank on the truth embargo way back, and they've stayed in that tank. The cable networks, when they came out, followed suit. And some of that is because over the last 30 years, it varies from time to time, but often these networks were owned by multinationals, including government contractors. Right now, they're owned by entertainment conglomerates like Comcast and Disney. But this kind of heavy corporate ownership makes them much more reluctant to do anything that would upset the U.S. government.
And that's why I don't know, the news media. I couldn't imagine CNN or Fox News actually taking the UFO or extraterrestrial phenomena serious enough in a debate. I could be wrong. I hope I am wrong, but
No, it's not a question of taking it serious. They know it's serious. It's a question of challenging the government's truth embargo, right, and creating and rocking the boat. It's about intimidation and fear, not about knowledge. This information on the ET presence has been raining down on the networks and the cable networks for 2 decades. It's coming in, doors, front door, back door, side door, the windows, all of it. So they know. They just have no courage. They're compromised. Now, the print media is a different ballgame. The print media, in large measure, are owned by corporations that were set up specifically for those publications, or in some cases, syndicates. They don't quite have the, government tie-in corporate ownership situations. And so that's where we're making progress. If you go to paradigmresearchgroup.org and you click on the bottom right link, we'll take you to the main site. And when you go there, if you then, under the quick links, right, just a second. Let me just, what's that doing here? Oh, there we go. And under the quick links, if you go to Media Archive, you see there's about 8,000 articles that have been logged in there, linked in, on this issue in print media, English language press, global English language press, no paranormal press, regular news outlets, and there are thousands of them. Mm-hmm. And that's only a fraction of the total articles that have been written since 1947. Probably it's more like 25,000, maybe 30,000. So the print media have covered this. They have not challenged the government. They haven't gone to the government's door and started knocking on the door real hard and saying, look, we want answers about this. But they are getting there. And, of course, as I mentioned, the political coverage, which is, of course, where this ultimately has to go, since 2014, is the greatest ever. And there's more on the way. So all I can tell your listeners is that the awareness of the Rockefeller initiative that Clinton was involved in, along with her husband and John Podesta, campaign chairman, as well as other key people that have served in government, is being spread all over Washington, D.C. A 3-hour, a disc, it was part of a 10-disc DV set of a citizen hearing on disclosure. The second disc, second disc, which is day one, afternoon, has 3 hours of testimony about the Rockefeller initiative on it, and a set of those discs was sent to every congressional office in town. PRG has been sending information to about 180 offices frequently in the last 12 months, often referring to the Rockefeller initiative. And then, of course, it's been working with a lot of reporters getting these articles out, and the articles are now referring to the Rockefeller initiative, which hadn't happened for 22 years. The first reference was in, I believe, an article by Eric Pfeiffer in the riot.org, in which he mentions the Rockefeller initiative. That's the first time it's ever mentioned since it started.
Somebody asked, what's the Rockefeller initiative? I kind of would figure everybody kind of knew at this point.
Somebody's not going to.
Yeah.
The Rockefeller Initiative was the effort by Lawrence Rockefeller to convince the Clinton administration to release all the UFO files and end the truth embargo back in '93. This initiative went on for 3 years. There were a lot of people involved. There were 33 principals. There were research reports done. Meetings were held. The Clintons met with Rockefeller at his ranch. And then, but they weren't able to get anything. They weren't able to get any files released. We assume, but do not know for sure, that Clinton was basically told, like Jimmy Carter, to go to pound sand, meaning you're just the president. You don't have a need to know on this. And then as the election of 96 approached, they dropped it. And so it lasted for about 3.5 years. But then all of the people involved on the government side, the Clinton side, the Clinton team, knowing that they all had significant political ambitions, made the decision, we'll just never talk about this again, like it never happened. And they didn't. And it wasn't mentioned, and they were not, and no reporter up until about 8 months ago had ever acknowledged that they had asked a single question about it to any of these people. You know, President Clinton, Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, Liam Panetta, Mac McLarty, John Gibbons, who's now passed.
Is testimony the best evidence that we have right now for this? I mean, even there's presidents who have come out and said that they've seen UFOs. I mean, there's been some pretty prominent people who have given their accounts. But I mean, is this? And I think it's pretty good evidence. So don't get me wrong. But I'm saying, is it the best we got?
I don't know. It's all part of the evidentiary picture. There are plenty of witnesses of rank and station that have information about this, that have encountered events and been involved in stuff. And the collective testimony is overwhelming. And then you've got plenty of other evidence. But from the political standpoint, in terms of moving the political compass, testimony of generals and captains and colonels and politicians and astronauts, pretty powerful stuff. And we've got it, which is why we held, PRG held the citizen hearing on disclosure in 2013 at the National Press Club, was to bring 42 witnesses like that together to testify in a mock congressional hearing in front of 6 former members of Congress, so we could show what it would be like and how powerful this testimony was. Then we shipped the whole 30-hour record to the entire Congress. We also webcast it, so people in Congress or media that didn't have the, courage to come on down and watch it live could watch it in their office. So this whole thing has really been in play going back to May of 2013, but then we escalated it in 2014. Between November 5th of 2014 and July of 2015, people were supporting PRG, primarily based at a Facebook group called the Disclosure Lobby, generated, we estimate now, around 2.5 million tweets, hashtag disclosure in almost all cases, with links and photos and graphics all across the board, media to Congress to the candidates. 2.5 million.
Well, everybody's talking about it except for the people that we kind of want to talk about it, right?
The people that need to talk about it are the people that want to be president of the United States.
Yeah.
And while they are speaking to and raising issues that each day challenge the intelligence of the American people and are throwing around rather substantial menu of nonsense and being asked questions by these, quote, esteemed moderators on the networks and the cable channels that are just useless. And the list of really important issues that are not being asked, as always, is long. And the American people are not being informed, not only about the issues themselves, but about what these people think about them, because they don't even ask about them, which is why our electoral process is in deep decline, very dysfunctional, and giving us nothing but bad outcomes. This issue is emerging. Now, the job of the advocacy movement is to overcome both the incompetence, the ignorance, and the cowardice of particularly the television network and cable news venues, and force the issue into the open by placing them in a situation where they think it's in their best interest to ask these questions, lest they be preempted by other venues. The print still has the power to drive this forward, but again, the print media are not are interfacing with the candidates in quite the same way as the networks are. These debates in town halls, which are increasingly difficult to watch, are still coming out of television. So this is a very complicated picture. Someone would have to go to that website, the political coverage site, which is linked off of the Paradigm Research Group main site, and read a lot of these articles before they start to get an idea of just what's going on. This is not simple stuff.
No, it's not. And, I would think that after the Phoenix lights, and I remember that was, I remember sitting home and seeing it on the news, the local news, they were showing these lights in the sky and stuff. You would think that right there would have set, some stuff up. But nothing, I think the governor at the time comes out and makes jokes about it, and it's a shame because I think there's been enough evidence to say that this should be seriously looked into, and whoever's covering it up needs to stop. I mean, it's all for all of us to know, I think.
Sure. Phoenix Lights though was 1997.
Right.
That was 19 years ago. No, but 19 years ago? Yeah, it was 19 years ago. So it was a little early for it to be too impactful, but it did generate a great deal of media and is now viewed as one of the most important events in the genre, as well it should be. But an awful lot of water has gone under the bridge since then.
It has.
Another Phoenix Lights event now would be dramatic. I mean, it would be profound. So, for the media needs to be aware of that they may just get preempted by events.
And on top of that, I mean, everybody's got a camera in their pocket now. I mean, everybody's got awesome software on their computers. I mean, they could, when they say, oh, it's just a flare, believe me, everybody and their uncle will be, running it through programs.
Well, yeah, look, in terms of sightings and so forth, there's never been more awareness of that. There's never been more reporting and videos. Though there's a limit to just what you can film in the sky.
True.
And there's a limit to how much power that has. As I've said many times, it's no longer about lights in the sky. It's about lies on the ground. And it's not about UFOs. It's about extraterrestrials. But let me put it this way. Just in the last not many months, you had the passing of Edgar Mitchell, which generated quite a number of articles because he had obviously been speaking out on this.
Yeah.
Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut. And then right about the same time the X-Files was about to have another run, the 6-episode run, the CIA released a number of files and new postings about the UFO issue, about the ET issue, on their CIA website, which generated hundreds of articles around the world. Very interesting.
It is interesting, but now, of course, some are saying, well, they just dumped, useless stuff, basically, just to kind of discredit the X-Files or what have you. I don't know.
No, that's not what happened. Anybody that says that doesn't know what they're talking about. These listings were serious on the site and remarkable in that they did it at all. And then on December the 30th, Secretary Clinton made her remarks at the Conway Daily Sun to the reporter Damon Steer, where when he asked her about the UFO issue, again, he's using that phrase, not me, she gave him a substantial response, saying, and this is the first time that any candidate for president in the Democratic Republican universe or any president has ever said these things. And she said, one, that she would get to the bottom of it. Two, she'd promised her campaign chairman she would get to the bottom of it. She talked about a potential task force to investigate Area 51. And then she made it the most important statement, which is, we may have already been visited. We just don't know. Now, this generated somewhere, I think, over 500 articles worldwide, which includes mentions on, including here mentions on like local television stations.
Yeah.
500. It was a worldwide story. So they're literally not teasing, but they're putting up these trial balloons, waiting to see what happens. Not long after that, there was a debate, and in spite of the fact that this is a worldwide story, the moderators, and I forget which one it was, I think it was NBC, had wanted nothing to do with it. They didn't bring it up. So one of the reasons the United States has been in decline now for some time, and one of the many reasons American people are very angry, frustrated, paranoid, disgusted, and behind the curve on the issues, on the solutions to their problems, on the nature of the problems themselves, is the catastrophic failure, and it wasn't always this way, of the network news operations, and then the ostensibly, big cable news, 24-hour cable news operations. They have just simply failed the American people spectacularly.
Oh, yes, they have.
We'd be better off if they maybe didn't even exist, and the newspapers were getting all that money and out there doing serious reporting. And so these news shows, which are often mostly just nothing but propaganda, are giving the illusion to the American people that they're being informed when they're not. And thus, the American people are going to get blindsided, or constantly being blindsided, by reality, whether it's in the financial sector, whether it's in the Middle East. Suddenly, reality shows up, and people are going, where did that come from? So, again, these networks need to be completely overhauled, and the news operations on all television have got to be significantly changed by some method. I don't know what it is.
They do. They really do, because I mean, they don't tell anybody anything. All you can see, you can go to any one of those stations and you see pretty much the same stuff, just a little bit different twist on it all. And it's basically the same news over and over again. I mean, it's just they don't tell you anything you need to know. It's most of the stuff they're reading it off a teleprompter, and they're being told what to tell you. Like you said, what happened to the real reporters who would go out and really get the scoop and give it to the people? We don't have that no more.
Investigative reporting costs more money.
Yeah,
and these corporate-driven news operations are being run like chicken nugget factories. I mean, it's how can you make the chicken nugget as cheap as possible so you can make as much money? And so again, our situation now is not that much different from what the Soviet people faced during the Soviet regime, with the fully government-controlled papers like Izvestia and Pravda and so forth, where, I mean, they were at least ad-free. They'd have to put up with advertisements. And they were running programs and news. The papers were essentially ad-free. And but it was all government line, but probably dealt with more serious stuff. And the same thing for the television there. Probably was more serious than our networks now. But of course, whatever it was covering was skewed to the state party line. But in terms of reality, the Soviet-run news and television and paper, well, and I'm going to leave papers out now because I think our newspapers are coming around, but the Soviet-run radio and television was about as useful to the Soviets as our radio, TV news now is to the American people. So that is an incredible indictment of where we have arrived at, given all of the money, billions of dollars that's been spent on radio and television news organizations over these last years. And I say last year, 60 years. To see it decline to this level is pretty sad. I mean, it's striking. So that is one of the problems. That's one of the obstacles that, and one of the issues that that the advocacy on the ET issue has got to deal with. We are dealing with an incompetent news operations in both television and radio. So, but that's okay. I mean, that's just the deal. That's what the hand has been dealt. Right now, PRG is having great success with the print media. I'm working with 11 reporters of 11 different mainstream print venues that have already written about the political connections on this extraterrestrial issue, particularly with regard to Hillary Clinton and the Rockefeller Initiative, and have been green-lighted by their editors to do more, meaning the rest of the year. That's 11. I'm hoping that number will be soon up to maybe 13, 14. And all of these reporters are on a private, blind copy list with PRG, and they get updates directly from PRG that are keeping them appraised of what's going on, and any other assistance that they want to go deeper and deeper into the story. This is unprecedented. Yeah. And so I just got to let the Congress know, and I want to let the candidates know, and I want to let these goddamn, television news operations know that this issue is closing in on them. And, they can hide under the bed, they can go hide in the closet, put a bag over their head, whatever. But eventually it's going to run over them. And they need to decide whether they're adults and serious people, whether they're adults or whether they're cowering children. You're going to take on the big issues. Now, this isn't the only issue they need to take on. There is just a whole list of incredibly difficult issues that are just not even mentioned. And I mean, I don't want to get into a long diatribe about the frivolousness of these campaigns, because I could go on for an hour and it wouldn't accomplish a hell of a lot. Most people, it's self-evident. Most people know that the absurdity of our political system right now is evident. What they're less cognizant of is the consequences of that. They know it's ridiculous, but it's a little more difficult to then understand the consequences of that ridiculousness. But those consequences are severe, very severe. So that's kind of the circumstances right now. Expect more articles. Now, if people want to get these articles as soon as they come out, and they want to know what PRG is doing, they have got to subscribe to PRG's email list, and that's PRG@paradigmresearchgroup.org. I've got some subscriber links on my site, various places, or they can just send subscribe to PRG@paradigmresearchgroup.org, and they'll get I've got a pretty sizable list, and they'll get updated on this fairly in real time. But again, there's plenty of articles to read. Yeah. Just go read the maybe 60 articles about the CIA files release, and you realize this has been taken seriously around the world. So this is a game that's going on. Hillary Clinton is dancing, John Podesta is dancing, Bill Clinton is dancing, Obama, the networks, they're just sort of dancing around, not able to, how do we go forward? They don't know what to do. They're all wrapped up in this truth embargo in one way or another. And PRG's job as an advocacy organization is to, solidify this, to gel it, to bring it together so these people can make real-time decisions and deal with it, as opposed to continuing to dance until, the apocalypse.
Yeah, that's right. Stephen, we've got to take a quick break here. Are you still thinking that Obama could still be the disclosure president, or do you think it's going to surpass him now?
The pace things are developing, certainly it looks like it will be Obama. Where things are going to go from here is, more print articles are coming. And these reporters are now sending questions into the Clinton campaign, into Podesta. The Mother Jones article that just came out 2 days ago and will be on the internet within a couple of days. And I'll be sending that around. He sent a bunch of questions over to the Pentagon, and the Pentagon, like, the Pentagon spokesman got back to him and just trying to laugh it all off. He wasn't convincing though, and the writer A.J. Vicens was not impressed. They were just trying to say, oh, "You're driving us crazy. Why are you sending these questions?" This kind of nonsense. It's really embarrassing. This is our Pentagon. This is our military that is to defend us. But as these questions keep coming in, they're going to realize, at some point they're not going to be able to just stonewall them. They've never had these kind of questions coming at them, and at some point it's just going to get worse. So that's underway. Mm-hmm. I'm still in the process of setting up more meetings on Capitol Hill. In fact, invites are about to go out, or requests to meet are going to go out to about another 190 offices in the next couple of days. I've already met with about a dozen offices, House and Senate side, and may continue to meet. And as long as the politicians, and particularly the people running for president, know that I'm up on the Hill talking to these offices about this issue, particularly the Rockefeller Initiative, that keeps them very uneasy. So that's putting pressure on them. Yeah. I have sets ready of the full 1,000 pages of documents that confirm the Rockefeller Initiative, of which you can see about 170, I think, or so, of the most important ones up on the Rockefeller Initiative website, which is linked to my top page, paradigmresearchgroup.org, ready to deliver to the 6 committees once I get meetings over on that side, so that they can have paper confirmation in their hands, because the people that work in these committees and so forth, most of them are lawyers, and they like paper. It's more substantive to them. So you got a document under FOIA with all the right stamps on it, and they're looking at it, and it's confirming that Hillary Clinton was involved in the ET issue in 93 to 96. This is powerful. I've got those ready to go. And then the next step is to get on the news. I mean, get on the television news. I mean, how many talk shows are there? There's a lot.
There's a lot.
And it's only some point they're gonna bring me on. I'm gonna be able to start talking about this on the news venues, and that's going to take things up to the next level.
I see. Well, we've got a lot of questions that are coming in from some of the listeners. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and, I'll get to some of them. Let's see. We've got, I'll start from the bottom up here. We've got a question from JJ. JJ says, how does he feel about Trump and disclosure? Does he feel that it might be better for disclosure?
He
certainly got a big enough mouth to say it.
Well, keeping in mind that the goal here is to get disclosure soon. I mean, literally this year, early this year, from Obama. So it's not about who's going to disclose in the next presidential term. That's still 10 months away. But Trump has never said anything about this issue. He has no public position at all. That's point one. Point two, he is without boundaries.
Yeah.
So if I had to pick a candidate that might grab on to the issue and what's in the media about Secretary Clinton and attempt to use it against her, he would be the one most likely to do that. Now, if Trump were to use the information out there about Hillary Clinton, like her statements to the Conway Daily Sun and so forth, and try to ridicule her, tin hat her, as we sometimes say, that would bring the issue very much into play and trigger a substantial round of questions, bring it into the debates. And so in that regard, Trump could do a huge service to the American people by advancing the process very quickly, not by endorsing it, but by using it to attack her. So he gets tweets from my people all the time, or from the supporters of PRG all the time. They're going into his campaign. He's got people that read the news. These articles are hard to miss. I mean, Hillary's statements to the Conway Daily Sun, it was like 500 articles.
Whew.
Around the world. So you believe me, there are people in the Trump campaign that know this is out there. Now, so far they've chosen not to to use it against Hillary, though God knows they'll use anything else, which is very interesting. And I've talked about this. One of the most remarkable things politically that I'm aware of, going back to 1992, is the fact that no matter what connection is made in the public to the ET issue by Podesta, by Bill Clinton's appearances on Colbert Show and Jimmy Kimmel Show, statements he made back in 2007 in Hong Kong, or Bill Richardson's statements, no matter what is out there, the Republicans never use the ET issue to attack the Democrats or the Clintons, even though they would happily run over them with their car if they thought they could get away with it. Hate them. Mm-hmm. And that is absolutely remarkable. Under the truth embargo and the intellectual ghetto that it created, theoretically they should be beating them up like crazy, but they don't. And this is a classic case of the dog that didn't bark. If the ET issue was not incredibly real and incredibly important, they would slaughter them over this. I mean, they would just skewer them. But it is real, and it is important, and there are people in the Republican side that know this. And I believe the reason they never attack them on this issue is because they know that this issue could blow out into the full public domain at any time, and if they were to attack on that basis, they would be essentially impaled on their own petard. And so they shut up, finding other ways to attack, many of which are nonsensical.
Right.
So that's another way of describing. This is why people sometimes refer to this whole scenario as a kabuki theater. It's really bizarre, and it's dysfunctional and embarrassing, and just one aspect of a dysfunctional process, multi-system dysfunctional processes that are ruining the country. Truth is virtually nowhere to be seen. You can't find it. I mean, if we ran our sciences this way, all of our planes would crash, our rocket ships would blow up, the internet would fail, right? And our hospitals would kill everybody instead of just 5%. You can't do science that way, but in the politics, it's like, the truth is out of the question. That's the last thing we want to deal with. So when people say, well, then how did the country get where it is? How did we get in a situation where we've developed all this wealth and yet have all these problems, and we have all these good intentions, but we have so many enemies? Just look to the failure of the systems, the dysfunction of the systems. That's how we got there. We worked very hard to get where we are right now. We've squandered unbelievable opportunities, unbelievable amounts of money, unbelievable blood and treasure and goodwill. And so, that's exactly what happens. Right? I mean, it's like the guy lying in the gutter in front of a bar who's lost his job and his family and his money and his health is gone, and he looks up from the street pavement and says to somebody passing by, "How did I get here?" Yeah. Well, you're a coke addict and an alcoholic, and you spent all your money on the drugs, and your wife left you. I mean, that's how you got there. You worked really hard to get there.
That's right.
Now, the American press should be informing the public of this all the time. But instead of doing that, the American press, in order to preserve their ratings and or not offend the government, basically has said, we'll just pretend the emperor does in fact have a beautiful set of clothes on, an Italian $2,000 suit, and that way we won't have to work so hard. No. What a mess! What a mess! And the candidates are trying to point this out, but as far as I can see, I have yet to see a single candidate on either side that's actually able to speak to this dysfunction. None of them are able to go that far, whether they are capable or not. And that, of course, is unfortunate as well.
Well, another listener, it's JJ. He had another question here. He says, has Steve ever tried pursuing disclosure from other countries?
There are activists working in other countries. Mm-hmm. There have been engagements of other governments. I can't do that. I mean, I got my hands full right here with this government. I've certainly tried to advance the issue in various ways. I created the Exopolitics World Network, which is a group on Facebook that you're welcome to join, Exopolitics World Network. Also, there's a website, exopoliticsworld.com, which lists websites that have been created around the world. But it's out of my capability and resources to pursue formal campaigns against with other governments. Now, I will do this. This is something I do, and that is, I rarely miss an opportunity to mention to audiences, big or small, that Barack Obama isn't the only head of state capable of making the announcement that there's an ET presence. And there are others. Two in particular, Xi Jinping of China and Vladimir Putin of Russia. Vladimir Putin is the prime candidate to do it. It completely fits into his modus operandi.
Yeah.
And would be a huge blow to the United States. I mean, it would just be a catastrophe for the United States for Putin to give call the press into the Kremlin and make the announcement and provide some very provocative and compelling evidence from the archives of the Russian military and intelligence services, and I assure you that he has access to them. Nobody in the Russian military tells Vladimir Putin he doesn't have a need to know.
That's right.
And keeps his job for 24 hours.
Let alone their life.
Well, who knows? But so at any time he could do this. And I fear, the yes men and women in the White House and the essentially cowardly media are simply not paying attention to that. They're just not willing to consider it. It's like considering an asteroid 15 miles wide crashing into the Earth, which of course would ruin everybody's day. So you just don't want to think about that. Well, the chance of Putin acknowledging ET presence is a lot more likely than an asteroid. And as we get closer here, as this heats up in Washington, which it is right now, be assured, these articles, for instance, about Hillary's statements in New Hampshire, they're around the world. Believe me, the Kremlin is well aware she made these statements. If they see this thing heating up, he may decide, okay, fine, I'm stepping in. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to wait. I let Obama be the disclosure president. I'm going to be the disclosure president. So, and of course, they can't stop that. I mean, even if the Pentagon and the president decided it was time to move, it's going to take some time for them to have their little meetings and reach their understandings, and Putin could act at any time. So there's no guarantee that they won't be preempted, but at least if they get going on this, their chances improve.
Yeah.
But they have a huge problem, unless their intention is, we don't have the courage to deal with this, and so we're just going to let the Russians do it. We'll just wait, and the Russians will do it. Then we'll have to follow suit, and we won't, and the focus will be on the Russians. I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking. I mean, it's a colossal mistake to allow this legacy to get away from them, and yet. Going back to 1964, I mean, I've lived through and paid attention since, that time when I was not too old. I was 18. I've seen my country make one colossal mistake after another. All right? And I was raised that, this is a great country that's really got it together and has great values and great economy, great this, great that, everything's great. And yet I've watched this nation make one colossal blunder after another without end. And, it has a lot of resources, and it's sheltered by the two oceans, and it has has done some good things in the past to generate an educated public and what have you. And it's generated a lot of wealth. But all of these advancements are overridden by these mistakes.
I would agree.
It's like the kid that's really bright and doing great in school and getting straight A's, but decides on Friday night to get completely drunk and drive his car into a gas station pump, blow up the car. I mean, it's like all that education, all that IQ doesn't really mean much if you're going to make mistakes like that.
Yeah, because you're not going to be using it where you're going. That's for sure. You're not going to need it where
Exactly.
you're going.
Right. So this is disconcerting to me. Empires rise and fall, and life is short. I get it. The U.S. will still be here when I leave, but again, as an activist and someone with a certain social consciousness, it's hard to watch my nation make these kinds of blunders. Well, this is just one more. The way they're now handling the ET issue is a massive blunder, and there will be consequences.
Yeah.
All I can do is point it out and hope that somebody in the White House, or the Pentagon, or at CNN, or ABC News is listening, and we'll make even more progress. Now, I still think we're making progress. And let me tell you, if any of your listeners see me turning up on CNN or MSNBC or any of the network news shows, the day they see that, I've been there before, but it's been a long time. But they may see me show up again, that will be their cue to know that we're really close. And it ain't going to be much longer.
Okay, and another question here says, is the Democratic debate the only venue where Hillary's role in the Rockefeller initiative can break open into the media, and how can you be confident this will happen since the network news stations have remained indifferent to the print media in the last 2 months?
Well, I mean, it's a matter of experience. I know that there are limits to how much you can stonewall, and that the reporters working in the print media can push this pretty hard. And at some point, the networks have no choice. So, am I absolutely certain? No, absolutely not. I'm not certain, but I'm telling you, it's looking better all the time. As far as how it could break out, a debate is certainly one possibility. A town hall is another. Town hall is actually an easier venue for one of these steam networks to break the issue out. So that's the second one. A reporter could hit her really hard with some tough questions while on the stump, while she's campaigning. In other words, something much more aggressive than, say, what Damon Steer did. I'm not criticizing Damon. I mean, he asked her about the issue. She gave him a response. It's a big story. It was very important. But believe me, there's plenty more questions to be asked, and the questions need to really focus in on the Rockefeller Initiative and demand specific responses, keeping in mind that the documents proving the Rockefeller Initiative and her involvement have been on the net for 15 years. It's not like you can say, what Rockefeller Initiative? So that could do it. Now, obviously, she could proactively do it, meaning not wait for anybody to ask her anything. It'd come out and say, look, we need to talk about something here. I want to tell you about some things, which you need to know. That's fourth way. And that's, the four most likely possibilities. She could write an op-ed for the New York Times, or Podesta could write an op-ed, or so it's either going to be passive or active. And it'll either come sooner or later. Now, keep in mind, here's one of the problems that they face, and it's a non-trivial problem. Assuming they can't simply lay low and ride the network apathy into the White House next January 20th, and a lot of water is going to go under the bridge between now and then at some point this comes out. Now, every election, every campaign, or rather primary election and caucus that takes place in the coming months really increases the stakes for Secretary Clinton. Why? Because when this comes out and the questions fly, I mean, it's going to, a lot of information is going to emerge, and every voter every voter in those previous elections and caucuses, he's going to want to know why she didn't say anything before that. We went to the polls to vote one way or the other, and you didn't tell us about this then, and now you're bringing it out. I mean, you're running for president, and you waited till now. See, that's awkward. That's really, really awkward. And it doesn't look pretty at all. And more importantly, it speaks directly to her number one weakness, which is the perception that she is not forthright, she is not transparent, and she's manipulative. So this is not good. Now, if they make it all the way to the White House, they don't care. But I'm telling you, I know enough about what's going on to say I don't think they can make it. And in fact, when people go and read the Mother Jones article that just came out, right? This article, as a couple of others have, featured a quote of mine, and actually featured it. They stuck it right there as a, I don't know, what do you call it, a sidebar? And essentially, that quote is, Secretary Clinton will not make it to the White House without going through the extraterrestrial initiative, or the extraterrestrial issue, rather.
Well, I think that it would take something like that for her to even get close at this point. I really do believe that. We have a call, Stephen.
Yeah.
Torchwood, welcome to Late Night in the Midlands.
Hi, Michael. How you doing? How you doing, Stephen?
Just fine, Torchwood.
I got a little bit of insight. I don't believe that she will be even nominated to be the forerunner. She will be taken out. Obama will have her indicted to take her out of the race. He has his eyes set on being Secretary General. So the only possible way that he can get into that position is if he takes her out of the race, because she wants to nominate Bill. And they're waiting for the last possible second to take her out, because they're waiting till it's going to be unrecoverable. So within the next 2, maybe 3 months, they will indict her. And that will result in a slot being opened up, and they will slide Biden in there. And Biden will nominate him to be Secretary General of the United Nations, making him basically king of the world. And that's what the goal is. He's already bought his little property over there in Dubai. And that's how it's all going to turn out. The disclosure will be a part of it. I don't believe disclosure will happen until after the election.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your call, Torchwood.
You know it, brother.
All
Talk
right.
to you soon.
Have a good one. What do you think about that, Stephen?
That's provocative theories. Couldn't rule that out. It's possible that that's what's in play. I don't know. I do agree with one thing, that her nomination is by no means a certainty now, and that she is facing some relatively serious problems.
Yeah.
And that actually is helpful, because the more in doubt her nomination becomes, the more in doubt her prospects of being president become. The more attractive is the decision to engage the extraterrestrial issue finally and the Rockefeller initiative and bring that fully into play, where she has a historic connection and can speak to it, as does her husband and her campaign chairman and others. Now, this would be a huge change of subject, which would completely divert attention away from these other issues. So my thinking is that if she does get in trouble with respect to the nomination, that increases the likelihood that they will, one way or another, find a way to bring the ET issue into play, get the Rockefeller initiative into play, and start talking about it. And they will quickly find that there are, tens and tens of millions of people that are quite ready to hear about it. Right. And they will get an extremely positive response from a whole lot of people. Now, keep in mind that the Republican candidates are already, they've got nothing here. What they know about it, I don't know. It's probably not much, and they have no connection to the issue at all, and so they are just about completely out of the loop.
Well, I would agree with that. When it comes to this issue, I don't think any of them, certainly, how could any of them? They're they've not been in it long enough, I don't think. Let's see here. We got another question from our listeners, and then we'll take our final break, and we'll come back and we'll finish up. We'll have a little bit longer to go here. Let's see. Ask Steve if disclosure being near means that von Braun's statement of fake alien invasion is close to operational readiness.
Von Braun's statement, as relayed by Carol Rosin, was a long time ago. Exactly how long, I don't know, but I think we're talking at least 40 years. And so whatever might have been the circumstances then that would have prompted him to say that, I do not think those circumstances are the case now. Of course, von Braun had no idea the internet was coming. I doubt he had any idea the internet was coming, or at least would be here at this time. So simple truth is that in the current circumstances, for the U.S. government to literally try to pull a fast one on this issue would be a major mistake. I just think that, in other words, if they try to create a false flag or concoct some story that's completely bogus in order to capitalize on the enormous interest the public and attention the public will be paying to an announcement like this, that I think now about 2 billion people in the world that have a computer or access to a computer and the internet. And they will be paying attention. They won't just be looking off in 2 billion different directions. They're going to be paying attention, laser-like attention on everything that comes out of the government's spokespeople. And so an attempt to do this, I think, would be uncovered or shredded in no time. And it would be just a public relations disaster.
Yeah. So
I just think that opportunity is gone. So I'm not too worried about a massive manipulation of the truth on this as part of a disclosure event.
Okay. All right. Well, hang on with us here, Stephen. We're going to take our final break, and then we will come back. And anyways, folks, let's get back to it here with Stephen Bassett. I'm going to get to your questions again here, Stephen. Let's see. We've got another question here. If the government were to admit that UFOs were real, what would be the next step?
What the government's going to admit to is not that UFOs are real, but that extraterrestrials are here. That's disclosure. We're past the UFOs are real thing. That's 25 years ago.
I would agree.
What the next thing is post-disclosure world. That's, well, let's say Obama discloses on May the 20th. Within a few days, other nations will follow suit. They won't wait around. Their heads of state will quickly come forward. And how many will ultimately make a formal statement, I don't know. Probably most of the developed world. Most of the industrial world. And that will be interesting to follow. And then the media will take some time to sort of get its ducks lined up, assign resources to their reporters, and begin an intense investigative onslaught. Mm-hmm. American people, of course, will be paying extremely close attention. There will be articles flying everywhere, comments by the millions on the internet, and so forth. And we're just start to digest. I say digest. We sort of start to immediately adapt. That's what humans do. We adapt, overcome, improvise. That's why we're the leading species on the planet.
If we want to survive, we have to.
Mm-hmm. And what transpires in the first day, week, month, year after disclosure? Thousands of books will be written about. But first, we got to get there. So that's it's a short answer. I could spend hours on that subject, but that just gives you a sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We've got Stan is in New York. So I'm switching from chat to email here, trying to be fair with everybody here. Stan in New York, is a government military intelligence laboratory program involved with citizens of the United States without their consent, confusing 70 years of ufology.
Well, there's been a truth embargo, that's what I call it, and it's run within the military intelligence community. And its job was to undermine, ridicule, isolate, intimidate, in some cases, the issue in order to minimize public awareness, institutional involvement, like with colleges, universities, philanthropists, foundations, other granting institutions, and so forth.
Okay.
And keep the thing under control. Not a secret, but contained. And yeah, that has been going on. We know some things about it. The major information, most of the information about it is still unknown. Hopefully one day we'll find out. But that's the truth embargo, and of course ending the truth embargo is what disclosure would accomplish.
All right, fantastic. We've got Yan in Japan. Well,
all right, Japan. Good.
All right. When and where will the extraterrestrial disclosure begin? I guess what they're saying is there's some who have been saying, even a host on this network who's been saying that he thinks at some point there's going to be this massive UFO appearance in Mexico. So I guess the question would be more of like, where is this disclosure probably going to finally take place? And I guess that what they mean is world disclosure, where there's no more disputing it.
Well, yeah, that's the language is confused.
Right.
Disclosure is capital D disclosure. It's an event, and it's the formal acknowledgement. That may begin in the east wing of the White House. That hallway, with the podium at the end of it, with where the president comes out and talks. That's where disclosure takes place, if not in the Kremlin. Small d disclosure has been going on for 60 years, and small d disclosure will pick up the tempo post-disclosure without question. So we'll just have more small d disclosure, maybe a better quality of information. That would be nice. This person seems to be alluding, though, to ET activity. All of my work is about terrestrial stuff. I don't allow possible ET actions to in any way affect my strategy regarding the advocacy work. ETs will do what they'll do, when they want to, how they want to.
Right.
Obviously, the ETs could affect this process anytime, and they are. Again, we're still having sightings. They're still here, and so that alone continues to add fuel to this fire. But they could escalate that anytime they wanted to. They could force disclosure, literally force it, by any number of things. So that may happen. And if it does, well, then we get disclosure. I think that'll be a much more awkward, much more uncomfortable, much more even dangerous way. But it is a possibility. But it's not one I depend on. We need to focus on doing it ourselves. And then open contact, that's another matter. That's even more interesting in some respects. Does open contact follow disclosure? And I can debate that. I think it will, but exactly how long it'll take, we don't know.
Well, and I wonder, one of the listeners raised a question earlier, and I never actually got to it, but it's something I always wonder myself. I mean, with this whole, we're not going to tell you anything, who's in charge of not telling us? I mean, it would seem like ET and the governments agreed on this, because either one of them could disclose it all at any time, and so they must have an assurance from each other. But then yet you'll see little things come out from the government about it, and you'll see little things come out, UFO sightings actually coming out from the ET side of things, and so there's this, we're gonna mess with you almost. but we're not going to come out and tell you. So I guess who's in charge in the all in all?
Well, first of all, I'm not aware of any significant evidence that indicates that there's any agreement at all between humans and ETs on the disclosure issue. So I'm going to assume there isn't. I doubt it.
Well, you would think that the ET, and I'm here I go assuming, but I'm saying you would think that just like we got whistleblowers here on Earth, you would think there'd be somebody who would do something to say, on the ET side to be like, hey, we should tell these people we're here. Someone who might not, maybe they're not advanced enough to know that we probably aren't the best people to deal with. I don't know.
Look, there's not a lot of how would you say, coinage that comes from trying to speculate about what ETs would do or not do.
True.
I haven't got the slightest idea. I know what they do, but exactly what they're going to do next, I do not know. So I just can't think about it. The question of who runs it makes the decision. Theoretically, the president should be making the decision, but that's been pulled out from under the president. So the issue is run from inside the military intelligence community, deeply classified, cross-agency committees probably, and they don't really have to make a decision. The truth embargo has been in place for a long time, and as long as the truth embargo remains in place, they don't have to make a decision. They can just continue as is. In terms of ending it, well, that's an interesting question. In order for the president to make the announcement, a deal has to be struck with the Pentagon, which means somebody in the Pentagon, somebody within the management of this issue, is going to have to either approach or be approached by a very high-level person in the Pentagon that knows, who the managers or who some of the managers are of this issue deep down in these committees, and approach them or be approached by them, and which is to say that there is almost certainly some sort of chain of command that extends up from these cross-agency committees towards the Secretary of Defense. Now, whether that reaches the Secretary of Defense, I don't know, because Secretary of Defense is an appointed position by, quote, the president, right? And they come and go. And so that chain of command may end short of the Secretary of Defense, but still pretty high. And so that person talks to some of the people in the management committees, and they agree that something needs to happen. Then that person approaches the Secretary of Defense and briefs the Secretary of Defense, who then green lights a meeting with the president, and then the deal is struck. The understanding is reached. Something like that. But the ultimate decision to disclose will come from the White House. There is no other way it can come. It's not some lieutenant colonel in the Air Force working in the C ring at the Pentagon can't just decide it's time for the people to know and call up the Washington Post. That ain't going to happen. This is a decision that can only come from the president. The problem is the president's not even in a position to make that decision. The presidency of the United States has been dramatically weakened over the last 25, 30 years. And when you hear people talking about how the president has become a king and an emperor and all this, that's all total bollocks. It's propaganda. They want to paint the presidency as being super strong in order to, quote, serve their own agenda, when in fact the presidency has been weakened dramatically by the rise of the military intelligence complex and the undermining of the White House prerogatives by a dysfunctional Congress. So we got a weak president, dysfunctional Congress, and an extremely secret military intelligence complex. We have the only institution that is not profoundly dysfunctional is the Supreme Court, which is a problem and is often easily split on its decisions. But I don't see it as a dysfunctional institution. It's pretty much running the way it's supposed to. Everything else, though, is a mess. So that's the answer to my question. On that question.
All right. And, okay, I got a few more here.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody asked your thoughts on Billy Meyer And then after that, I've got Steve in Alaska who wants to know if you're aware of Mr. Hall. I think they're talking about Charles Hall and the Tall Whites. And so they want your opinion on both of those.
Yeah, I'm aware of Charles Hall. I've met him. He spoke at my ex-conference. It's an interesting story. I have some feeling it may hold up. There hasn't been much cooperation there. It's kind of a one-person witness situation. It's a fascinating story, and I think it deserves investigation and scrutiny and some respect. All right. In terms of the Meyer case is one of the longest-running, most complicated, I guess you could say, individual contact cases out there. Extremely many twists and turns, many layers. I'm not in a position to say what aspect of it is true or not true or what it all means. I've talked with many contactees. There are lots of them, and the stories can vary in complexity and so forth. The Meyer case is so difficult to work with, though, that I really can't use it in the advocacy. I generally don't use any of the contact stuff in the advocacy. I'm not up on the Hill trying to convince members of Congress or their staff that there's contact going on. The presence of extraterrestrials is more than enough to warrant their complete undivided attention. So again, I know people that have studied the case, and I leave it to others to make their own come to their own conclusions about it.
Okay. All right. And I've got a question here from our chat room. I don't know if this is if they're trying to, poke at you or not, but I'm going to give it to you anyways.
What about it?
Says, I once heard you say in an interview, Stephen, that if one makes money out of all this activism issues, they say DVD, books, blah, 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 it ruins all the interest and confidence on followers. Can you talk about that?
I never said that. I absolutely never said that, never would say that. So that person has got me confused with somebody else. Okay. I don't know what to answer. I think that people hold conferences. People get sometimes paid for speaking. People are selling books. It's all part of the way these things work. I can say this, that the people that have pursued this issue, both as in media or as researchers or as activists, are probably some of the most underpaid people in the world as regards major issues of consequence. So, all I can say is I have empathy for them. People may make money, may achieve some substantial resources post-disclosure, and they're welcome to it because they've paid their dues.
Okay. All right. Well, and my thing about it is this isn't all. People don't say, "Oh, wow, you're Michael Vera, or you're Steve Bassett, or you're whoever," and hey, because you're who you are, we're going to give you everything for free. I'm just saying, I'm not sticking up for anybody. I'm simply saying that I know to do what I do takes money. So I have to assume anything you're doing, Steve, is probably costing you money. And so
the whole business is about money. It gets raised, but it's mostly just people that don't like the issue and they want to attack. It's just not significant. Every major issue in this world is funded. Right. The people trying to save the whales have raised tens upon tens of millions of dollars. So the idea that people need money to pursue this advocacy or pursue this work is completely normal, and it's just simply a non-issue.
All right. Anne's in the UK. She says, she says, I have yet to see a convincing photo of an alien visitor. Do you know from your experience if there really are any photos of aliens in existence that have been proven to be 100% genuine?
It's impossible to prove. It's nearly impossible to prove that any photo is 100% genuine. Hell, they're still arguing over the photo of Lee Harvey Oswald with that rifle in the backyard.
Yeah. That's right.
But there are a number of photos out there of supposedly of ETs. And it wouldn't surprise me if some of them are legit. But which ones are and which aren't is very difficult. Sometimes it's so obviously a fake, but I wouldn't be surprised if post-disclosure we discovered some of these photos were were real. But the ETs clearly don't go out of their way to get photoed. So there aren't many. If there are, there are only a few. And I look forward to knowing which ones are real in the post-disclosure period.
All right. Mario's in California. Wants to know what your feelings are on the possibility of holographic technologies being used to fool the public now or any time in our future.
In terms of being used to fool the public on the disclosure event, I think the likelihood is zero, nearly zero. In terms of future, fooling the public in the future, the future is a long time.
Yeah.
It's not out of the question. I mean,
numerous supposedly mythological civilizations and antediluvian cultures highlighting their advanced developments and devices which had been provided by the ancient ones. It then functions as an ancient travelogue detailing the reintroduction of civilization after the Great Flood throughout every part of the world by those same extraterrestrial benefactors, the ancient ones, along with the amazing civilizations that were ultimately formed. My latest book, as you indicated, History of the Elder Gods, was just published and is the fourth volume within this continuing Journals of the Ancient Ones series. It commences before the Big Bang event, tracing the formation of the universe and the eventual emergence of earliest life within that infant cosmos, long before Earth's formation. That first being species eventually formed a benefactor coalition with other like-minded primordial life forms to spread civilization throughout the universe, eventually becoming known as the Ancient Ones. The record of their accomplishments is traced over billions of years, including their much later association with an emerging outer planet species within our solar system. Influences from both of those alien groups eventually spread to Earth, where their impact is traced from primordial times and into our present. The status of those two very different groups of ancient aliens and their now hidden nature since the 5th century AD is revealed, along with the potential ominous repercussions for our future. That's pretty much just a quick summary of the four volumes within this series, Ryan.
Well, if I may, I talked to you about this the other day, and I briefly mentioned it at the beginning of tonight's broadcast. And for anybody out there who's followed my work the last 6-7 years, I've investigated, researched, read documentaries, hundreds and hundreds of people I've talked to in terms of researchers and authors who have investigated this type of information. And whether it's Sitchin or Graham Hancock or Eric von Daniken, all very respectable in their own rights, although some of them, such as Sitchin, he basically says that he didn't really believe in a lot of what he was writing. He sort of fabricated a lot of it. And a lot of those writings, the Earth Chronicles, some of these other authors like von Daniken, this has almost become a theology in and of itself today, Don. It's almost become a religious belief system, a faith, and people believe it no matter what the evidence shows to the contrary, no matter how assumptive people's beliefs really are. And I just wanted to say, I'm not singing your praises for any reason other than the fact that I've read all four of these books. I just finished the fourth one today, and the information in them, for me at least, and maybe it was reading so many other books on these subjects in the past, this information to me seems to provide the most conclusive, logical explanation that I have read so far dealing with human origins and the existence of extraterrestrials, plus not discounting current knowledge and archaeological finds and to a large extent current information that we have about pre-human history to a certain extent. That's my viewpoint. What do you think about that? I mean, that's pretty much how you wrote these anyway, isn't it?
It is, Ryan, and thank you so much for those thank you so much for those kind words. I agree that the much of the reading audience that follows the ancient alien theories seem to come in with a preset mindset that, like you say, Eric von Daniken's or Zecharia Sitchin's works are absolute gospel, and anything that deviates from their work must be wrong. And I certainly don't want to come on your program and demean anyone else's research, but people can look at the same or do the same research, look at the same ancient texts, the same evidence, and come up with different conclusions.
Yes.
And I guess that's more what I would like to stress, my different conclusions from theirs.
Yeah, and your work...
I did have, by the way...
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ryan. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry about that. You go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that I guess tying in with this, I did have a very specific purpose in mind in writing this fourth book in the series, and if I could share that, that might help some of the confusion and so forth with the other authors also. The purpose that I had in writing this latest book really came about because the theory encompasses numerous academic disciplines, including cosmology and particle physics, chemistry, geology, biology, archaeology, and anthropology, all fields necessary in order to supply evidence supporting this new hypothesis. Hence, those various academic fields can occasionally become both distracting and confusing for some readers to follow. I am aware of certain readers' partially inaccurate interpretation of key elements within my theory, which they had derived from my prior volumes. That may have been due to my writing style or from the reader forming unintended conclusions, or more likely simply the presentation of a wide array of scientific and historic data that can sometimes be challenging to follow, Ryan. In any case, that prompted me to refine the finer details of my Elder Gods theory, and with the intent that this volume was to establish a simpler and more direct step-by-step development of the theory with less clarification details that I had in the earlier volumes and presentation of the evidentiary documentation in those same volumes. And this simplification was accomplished by merely referencing prior volumes for such in-depth analysis and confirmation of those specific aspects, if the reader might further desire substantiation and proof of the theory. Additionally, none of the prior three volumes revealed the disposition and fate of either group of ancient aliens after the circa 3150 BC exile of the so-called Elder Gods. This volume, the fourth volume, History of the Elder Gods, takes the reader through that long ago time of the Ancient One's temporary exile in the 4th millennium BC, and the subsequent rise to total power of the younger outer planet human-like aliens, who then proclaim themselves as gods over the human population on Earth. It also details their much later supposed disappearance by the mid-5th century, a development that actually occurred between roughly 300 and 450 AD, not all at once, in other words, leading to their subsequent transition to several behind-the-scenes positions of power.
And that leads us into the modern day, as correct?
That is correct, exactly. And it explains perhaps some of the oddities that we know happened in our recorded history, and helps explain some of the so-called supernatural events that apparently has taken place, over the millennia since the ancient times, and it really traces the ancient ones' likely influence and interactions with humanity while they are still in exile from those ancient times to our present day. And it reveals the impact of the now hidden younger gods on humankind throughout our planet's history, and their basically their association with ongoing wars, pestilence, poverty, economic stagnation, and financial control that our planet and humanity have faced over the ages.
So Don, Don, if I may, just for
go ahead, Ryan.
So for people out there who have never read any of this, this is sort of an overview of the content within the books, within the Elder Gods theory. I know that a lot of those whom I've talked to about your work before, they're always interested in getting into the details of the aliens and what they look like. I'm not going to really force us into that conversation, but in terms of what we call the Elder Gods theory, the ancient ones, you mentioned the breakaway outer planetary human-like beings. Could we get a little bit of a background on these two different alien species and then their influence on mankind, going back sort of to the beginning of how this theory pans out, if that makes sense?
It does, Ryan. Probably the best bet would be to kind of do a quick simplification of what the Elder Gods theory is from start to finish. Again, a very brief recap, and then you can ask specific questions, more pertinent to the, as you would reference, the outer planet human-like beings. Specific questions along those lines and so forth.
Sure. So
let me give your audience kind of just a quick summary of what the Elder Gods theory is. Obviously the Elder Gods theory forms the basis for my book series, and that theory proposes an alternate history for Earth's early development, the origin of humankind, our evolution as a civilized species, and our planet's long association with two very different groups of extraterrestrial visitors. That's the key. There are two very, very different groups of ancient aliens. The first group consists of 7 different and unrelated species that evolved during the very early years of the infant universe. Each had initially experienced near self-annihilation during their early cultural periods, but eventually overcame their shortcomings and achieved great wisdom to become highly evolved life forms. Upon meeting those surviving species, when they first met, in other words, they compared their prior experiences with younger species that each had encountered during their travels throughout that early cosmos, and with each of those 7 different non-related species recognizing a nearly universal trait of self-destructive tendencies among all emerging life forms. Now, long before Earth had even formed, that early group of 7 independent species ultimately formed a benefactor coalition to assist younger emerging worlds that they would eventually encounter. Those primeval aliens later became known as the Ancient Ones that we've referred to already. The infant races basically knew them as the Ancient Ones for the most part, and their coalition became known as the Cosmic Order. Now, billions of years later, after the Cosmic Order was formed, those 7 species benefactor group, the Ancient Ones, contacted our solar system, where life was first developing on a neighboring planet beyond Earth. The Ancient Ones brought civilization and knowledge to that outer planet human-like race, which quickly progressed into a successful advanced culture. Later, a planetary disaster within our solar system greatly diminished the population of that younger human-like race and ended their once great civilization. Much later, descendants from the very few survivors of that younger human-like race from within our own solar system became a contributing factor in the genetic lineage of earthly humankind through genetic engineering work performed by the Ancient Ones. Later still, that otherworldly ancestral species independently arrived to colonize Earth during a time when the Ancient Ones were providing knowledge and civilizing efforts to our earthly human ancestors. Here, what the Elder Gods theory exposes are the Anunnaki that Sitchin talked about. I referred to them as the outer planet human-like beings, the younger alien race that came to Earth.
So
their interference with our planet's
outer planet because they weren't from Earth.
That is correct, but from within our own solar system.
Yes.
In other words, to give a little bit more detail, why I continue to always refer to them as the outer planet human-like species is because their home world, even though it's part of our solar system, remains unknown. It is almost it is most likely that they came from either Mars or Meldeck. Meldeck was the planet that once orbited in the fifth orbit from our sun, the orbit between Mars and Jupiter, which now contains the asteroid belt fragments. And that broken up planet forming the asteroid belt was Meldeck. So those outer planet human-like species most likely were from Meldeck, but they also could have been from Mars instead. So because there is just inconclusive proof, there just is not enough information available so many years later to us as to their true homeworld. I merely refer to them as the outer planet human-like species, but your audience can think of them as either from Mars or Meldeck, the asteroid belt planet. But when they did come to Earth to colonize, and that was roughly in the earliest involvement with Earth on their own was around 5400 BC. And their interference with our planet's progress caused great disruptions on Earth during those ancient times and altered the direction of human progress the Ancient Ones had intended for our world. That caused much unrest and an eventual ancient world war. Go ahead, Ryan.
I just wanted I wanted to pause and flag the specific date that you gave there. I've read the book, so I have a general idea. You give a lot of historical information, scientific fact. A lot of that's based in modern scientific theory with proof. But how do you come to that 5400 year BC date for their involvement here on Earth?
It was taken from old records, myths, and so forth. Basically, the myth of Kumbari, when Alalu was overthrown by Anu on Mars. This is after the destruction of Meldeck, and it is known that the outer planet human-like species was relocated to Mars if Mars was not their home world. And at that time frame between 5500 and 5300 BC, there became an uprising on Mars with the outer planet human-like species descendants, and the king ruling that human-like colony on Mars was overthrown by his son, Anu, and that required Alalu, the dethroned king, to escape to Earth, actually on a kind of a one-way spaceship, if you will, very reminiscent of the early Mercury era space capsules.
So their technology at the time was similar to ours now.
Well, yes and no. We go back to the destruction of Meldeck, which was approximately 700,000 BC. The outer planet human-like civilization prior to that 700,000 BC destruction of Meldeck were much, much more advanced than the Mercury era capsule of 5400, roughly 5400 BC, because after the destruction of Meldeck, the outer planet human-like civilization was mainly spent most of their time trying to survive. So they did not continue, they lost most of their scientists, they lost their technical expertise with the destruction of Meldeck, and more than likely Meldeck was their home world. But again, there's just lack of sufficient evidence to make that a conclusive statement.
Don, we're going to take a short. I'm sorry. I think our line's a little bit delayed. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, let's continue Secret Teachings. We are live tonight. We were talking about the theory of the elder gods, and we had been talking about this outer planetary human-like beings, these human-like species that had perhaps lived on a planet called Maldeck, which was the asteroid belt planet, and something had happened to this planet. They were forced to move to Mars. A large portion of their society was wiped out. Could you explain and give us some more detail on that and a little bit more about the elder gods theory?
Right. Ryan, basically, let me go back even a step further. And prior to 700,000 BC, I want to establish what an advanced race and culture that outer planet human-like race was, with through the help of the ancient ones. Again, the ancient ones went around contacting new emerging worlds throughout the cosmos to help civilize those infant races and make sure that they don't self-destruct, I guess is the best way of saying it. Because the ancient ones had contacted the outer planet human-like race either on Mars or Maldeck, long before any contact with Earth, they grew into a very model and advanced civilization on their home planet, long before humans existed on Earth. Unfortunately, with the destruction of Meldeck, if Meldeck was their home planet or not, it affected that race drastically, eliminating most of their species and forcing them to consolidate the few survivors left after the destruction of Meldeck onto bases on Mars. Now, Mars could have been their original home world, and suffered a great cataclysm with the destruction of their neighbor Meldeck. So again, it's still impossible to ascertain for sure which was the home planet of the outer planet human-like species, even though it's more than likely it was Meldeck. But in any case, their once great civilization virtually ended with the destruction of Meldeck at 700,000 BC, and they went downhill thereafter. So they were an extremely advanced culture, way beyond the Mercury era capsule days, if you will, and they then spent most of their efforts after the destruction of Meldeck merely trying to survive. And so their civilization went downhill quite rapidly, and the ancient ones were precluded from merely restoring their once great civilization, because the surviving descendants from that civilization would not have been the ones that had built it. So they were concerned about how that would affect the mere survivors, the lineage down the line of those survivors.
So is that they wouldn't have had the moral
that
character.
Once great. I'm sorry, Ryan, I missed that.
Oh, I think we do still have a delay. I was saying that this is part of the cosmic order, and the ancient ones wouldn't, I mean, in part of this theory, wouldn't just install or instill an advanced form of technology unless it was in line with the progress spiritually and morally of that species, correct?
Absolutely. That sums it up much better than I could have. And that's that was the case, that the cosmic order, although they helped emerging infant races, they only provided knowledge, information, and assistance in keeping with the moral maturity, if you will, and enlightenment of each civilization. In other words, they did not want to provide nuclear arms, if you will, to an infant race that's merely going to use them in an erroneous way and basically destroy themselves or destroy neighbors, celestial neighbors. So it was a code of conduct under the cosmic order that prohibited any teachings, any assistance that exceeded the moral maturity of any culture.
So when this happened, this destruction of Maldek, I was curious personally when I read the book, just how you sort of describe this. Whatever the corrective measures, as you had mentioned, that took place on Maldek that led to this great destruction, was this sort of a mistake on the part of this species? Because from my understanding, anyone who had advanced to this level of technology to be able maybe to manipulate the core of the planet or something along those lines would have understood the consequences. But did that mean that even a morally mature society could not make mistakes with this type of technology, if that makes sense?
It does, and that's exactly what happened. As a matter of fact, to clarify it even further, the outer planet human-like culture had advanced to such a degree that they no longer needed the almost constant supervision of the ancient ones. They were pretty much on their own at that time of the destruction of Maldek, because they were such an advanced culture and such a model society. That the ancient ones felt as though, they were approaching such a mature status that, their assistance was no longer needed on a daily basis or, a regular basis. For that reason, the outer planet human-like species attempted their own correction that didn't involve the assistance and help of the ancient ones. And unfortunately, their planned corrective action taken ended up with the destruction of Maldek. Now, it's unknown if Maldek, again, was the home planet or not, and they were trying to correct the climate problem that was they were experiencing on Maldek as their home planet, or if they were using Maldek as an experimental test to see if it would work on their own home world, if that was Mars.
Right.
I'm probably not making a lot of sense here. This is getting into the middle of a theory without having the basis established earlier.
Well, you can take us back to that basis.
It's going to be hard to follow, is what I'm getting at. But in any case, they blew it up themselves. And it was a mistake. It wasn't done in warfare or anything of that nature. It was a miscalculation, and the best we can come up with, there's extremely few and vague earthly references that suggest that Maldek blew itself up, meaning its people destroyed it, almost for sure by accident. That's about the extent of the reference to the asteroid belt planet's destruction in any of our earthly ancient texts. And as one can understand, if this happened 700,000 BC, and we don't really have, there's no true civilization, if you will, human civilization on Earth at that time, there would be no reason for that information to really be readily available on Earth.
So Don, just to sort of recap a little bit, we have 7 groups of the ancient ones, different beings that have maybe different looks, maybe some humanoid, maybe some that are perhaps feline, reptilian, and so on and so forth. They go around to different parts of the universe, different solar systems, and they help infant species that are just emerging, and they send very similar look-alike beings to that planet, perhaps, as to not scare the inhabitants. They work somewhat behind the scenes. They help these infant races achieve some form of technical/moral maturity, and then continue to move on. Now, in the case of these outer planet beings, whether they had a homeworld on Mars or Maldek, the asteroid belt planet, we can call it that, something happened that led to the destruction of that planet. The ancient ones, this group of beings, helped these outer planet human-like beings maybe achieve some form of refuge on Mars, for example, or if that was their home world already, help them to build and construct facilities that would help them to await the further destruction of the Mars atmosphere for whatever reason that might have been. And I guess from that point, I'll sort of digress, but am I grasping the very general concept of this theory so far, or am I missing some pieces?
No, very, very much so. I would like to interject, though, one thing when you're talking about the 7 different species that make up the so-called group known as the ancient ones. These species are completely unrelated. These are from the very earliest times of our infant cosmos after the Big Bang. And they're from, more than likely, each of the 7 different species are from different galaxies even. In other words, they're not near neighbors. These folks are far-flung throughout the cosmos, and they just happen to meet up during the early years, if you will, of the cosmos and compare notes that these 7 species happen to have survived their own self-annihilation in their early years and gained great enlightenment and wisdom by doing so, and became crusaders, if you will, to assist younger emerging worlds. The catastrophic thing going back then, or going forward then to 700,000 BC with the destruction of Maldek, the ancient ones quickly intervened because of the cataclysmic destruction of Maldek not being a normal occurrence. They then gave great assistance, perhaps even more than they were allowed to do by the under the cosmic order mandates, in helping the outer planet human-like species, the survivors from that race, helping them set up colonies, bases, protective places on Mars, since Maldek was destroyed, and in its destruction greatly damaged Mars. Mars was also go ahead, Ryan.
You talk about some of the evidence for these quote-unquote colonies on Mars, as well as the 700,000 BC date that you give for the destruction of Maldek. All that's included in the theory, in the books, correct?
That is correct. The 700,000 BC date is established from basically 4 elements. We have with the destruction as great as it would have been with Maldek's breaking apart into the asteroid belt, it would have repercussions throughout the entire solar system. There are basically 4 elements that establish the 700,000 BC date. The first would be the largest meteor shower that's known to have impacted Earth, happened within that time frame, the 700,000 BC. Rare tektite meteorites, which display a double heating process. In other words, the first heating was with the destruction of Maldek, and to a molten state of very intense vitrification of the rocky mantle of the planet, then blown away from that debris and impacting Earth. Its re-entry into our atmosphere would be the second molten status of those rare tektite meteorites that are found on Earth. That's the second indication. The third would be the climatic impact on Earth because of the great meteorite shower, and that would have been either start of an ice age, or the continuation of one that might already be existing at that time. And the Gunz ice cover, the GUNZ, glaciation that ran from roughly 800 to 690,000 BC, fulfills that same third element, because it appears as though that longest ice cover at that time was extended by about 10,000 years, and that was due to the destruction of Maldek and the ensuing bombardment of the meteorite showers and its devastating effect on Earth also. And then the fourth element would be the largest meteorite period, or asteroid in that case, and go back to Dr. John Weihaupt. Since the late 1950s, he has concluded that there was a massive impact from the destruction of from the asteroid belt that impacted Earth, and he is almost positive that it impacted in the Antarctic region, and hence it's now under several miles thick ice cover, so it cannot be readily seen, detected, and so forth. And over the years, most recently, he has done gravimetric readings showing anomalous gravity readings throughout a large swath of Antarctica, in his mind, causing conclusive proof of that greatest meteorite or asteroid hit, again, roughly at that 700,000 BC time frame. So those four elements make up with all those four elements, the only time that fulfills all of those aspects is that 700,000 BC time frame. That's why I came up with the date.
Now, in the book, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about so far, as Don just described the elements that led him to that 700,000 BC date for the destruction of Maldek, which may or may not have been the home world of a group of outer planetary, outside of Earth, outer planetary human-like beings, similar to modern humans, but not exactly identical for all intents and purposes. All of this is really explained in a lot of detail inside of the Elder Gods theory in the books. And there's 4 books. We've got 3 of them to give away tonight: Elder Gods of Antiquity, Legacy of the Elder Gods, Gardens of the Elder Gods, and the new one, History of the Elder Gods. You can give us a call at 1208-650-4160. That's 1208-650-4160. We're going to give out 1 book, but you have to have a concise question for Don pertaining to the work. And we're also going to give out a book to somebody in the chat room tonight. That's lnmradionetwork.com/chat and listen, or you can go to facebook.com/The Secret Teachings. You can also find a link on thesecretteachings.info. If you're in the chat room, private message me a question for Don, and we will get you one of his books for free. You don't have to pay anything for it. We're giving out free books tonight. So Don, there's a couple of questions that I think I have that I would like to expand on. But before we get to any of that, we actually do have a call on the line. So let's go ahead and take this, and then we will get back to what we were discussing. So, oops, it looks like, Don, are you still there? It looks like we might have got disconnected from that call. Let me go ahead and call Don back real fast. And I apologize to the caller. An 815 area code, if you'd like to call back in. We had a little Skype difficulty there.
Hello?
Hey, Don, sorry about that. We got disconnected. Can you still hear me okay?
I'm calling in.
Oh, I thought we still had Don on the line. Who is this? 815 area code?
Right. I was disconnected.
Hey, Don. So we do have a caller on the line. Do you have a first name first of all, and then do you have a question for Don?
This is Jack.
Hey, Jack.
And I do have a question.
Yes, Jack.
Hi, Don. I'm just wondering
Jack.
if the group that you call the Ancient Ones would be considered the same as the ancient builder race, or another group called the Guardians that I've heard, if you're familiar with Corey Good or David Wilcock, refer to. They've referred to the ancient builder race. Would you consider that to be the same?
They are. They have gone by many names in ancient texts. The Ancient Ones being one, the Guardians being another, the Architects, the Builders, the Seven Sons, the Shining Ones, any number of names, Jack. So yes, they all are referring to the ancient ones, the 7 different species of ancient aliens that help emerging races throughout the cosmos. Excellent
Thank
question.
you for that clarification.
Thank you, Jack. Get in contact with me, and I'll get you a copy of one of Don's books.
Thank you very much.
All right, have a good night, Jack. Bye-bye.
You too.
And thanks for calling in, Jack.
All right, the line is still open, 120-865-4160. Any other questions for Don? We will be taking a short break here in just a few minutes. Also in the chat room, we'll give out another book. That's lnmradionetwork.com/chat and listen. We have 2 books left to give out. You can contact us also at thesecretteachings.info, rdgable@yahoo.com. Again, the phone number, 120-865-4160. So, Don, going back to what we were discussing, where does the theory take us from Maldek and then from what you had been talking about around 700,000 BC? Where does the theory take us? Where would you like to expand on that from?
Well, I guess just a real quick recap up to that 5400 BC timeframe that we talked about a little earlier in the program. From 700,000 until about 500,000 BC, virtually the outer planet human-like race regressed drastically. Again, all of their efforts, or most of their efforts, were spent on survival rather than cultural aspects and or advancements within their civilization. With the continuing deterioration on Mars, their new homeworld, if not their original homeworld, that deteriorating climatic condition on Mars forced the survivors eventually underground into subterranean lifestyle on Mars, furthering their survival problems. And by roughly that 500,000 BC time frame, it became apparent to the ancient ones that their race probably it would not survive if left to themselves and the deteriorating aspects of Mars. For that reason, the ancient ones decided to create a recombinant species, if you will, the ancient, the outer planet human-like race, combining them with the earthly ancestor at that time, ancestor of humans at that time, which was basically the Pithecanthropus, ape man, better known as Heidelberg man, Peking man, at that time. So the ancient ones basically engineered humanity by using a recombinant engineering process with the outer planet human-like race and the then available ancestors of humanity, the Pithecanthropus species on Earth. It changed both species. So we don't really know what the original human-like outer planet race was in its entirety. We do know that its successful predecessor ended up being, again, if you will, the BOPH gods, as I refer to them under the Elder Gods theory, or the Anunnaki in the ancient texts of the Near East and so forth. And of course, the final successful version of that recombinant engineering work with the Cro-Magnon species on Earth as our true ancestor.
Now, what you mentioned is
so that takes us.
it's a form of genetic modification. I'm just curious. You don't have to really go into too much detail unless you want to. What is your thought? And I do understand this might be more reserved for the end of tonight's show. And if you would like to get into it, then we can. But in terms of the genetic modification of this human species, their human-like species, and then the Pithecanthropus on Earth, the modern or the precursor to modern man, you have genetic modification there, the possibility that the BOPH gods, the breakaway outer planetary human-like beings that maybe lived on Mars, maybe lived on Maldek, had been doing some form of climatic geoengineering to their environment. All of this sounds really eerily similar to what we're doing to our planet right now, Don.
It certainly does. Many similarities. We can take it a step back even, and if indeed Maldek was the home planet of the outer planet human-like species originally, the condition that they were trying to correct that destroyed Maldek appears to it appears to have duplicated itself on Mars with their survival colony, if you will. Not only that, but now we see that perhaps Earth is undergoing those same planetary problems or concerns that sometime in our future we may be forced to address in a more drastic or dire manner than we are now. So we can see it coming in stages or waves, if you will. First Maldek, the fifth orbit from the sun, then Mars, the fourth orbit, and perhaps an inkling of it now in the third orbit, Earth. We see climatic changes happening. In any case, certainly the size of the outer planet human-like race was reduced to conserve natural resources as part of the recombinant genetic engineering work performed by the ancient ones. Again, the whole idea was to merge the two different species, an earthly human ancestor, in this case Pithecanthropus, with an outer planet a species, to create, if you will, as close to the same species as possible between the genetic engineering work on those two species or races.
Now Don, real fast.
What?
Why
Yes.
why was it that the ancient ones, for example, didn't just take Earth and make that the new home world of this outer planetary human-like species?
We go back to the mandates of the cosmic order. The indigenous species, the highest indigenous species of a planet, takes preference over any outside life form. In other words, if we go back to the 700,000 BC time frame, number one, Earth was not a conducive environment to relocate the few survivors from the Maldek disaster because of the Guntz ice cover. That was the most severe ice age that we have had. Again, it lasted for 110,000 years. It was extremely severe in its intensity, and it just was not a conducive environment to bring the few survivors to Earth. Hence, Mars was much more temperate at the time. It had running water. It had an ocean. It had a very livable atmosphere at that time, 700,000 BC. And again, the few survivors were able to live on the surface, although protected by protective domes from the continuing meteorite shower from the destruction of Maldek, but they enjoyed a reasonable farming community on the surface of Mars and so forth. So it was a more inviting, it was a more compatible environment and planet than Earth at that time. So that's why they didn't bring them to Earth. Plus, that coupled with the indigenous species taking precedent over an outside life form by the cosmic order mandates, virtually precluded it. So there were two reasons why they were not brought here by the Ancient Ones after the destruction of Maldek.
Sure. We do have another call. We had a little bit of an issue there on Skype. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to patch this call in, and then we'll take a short break and come back, and we'll continue with M. Don Shorn and the theory of the elder gods. So really quick, let me try to patch this call in with Don. Don, can you still hear me?
I sure can.
All right, perfect. We have a 618 area code, and we're trying to connect with them. Sometimes we have a little bit of a Skype issue.
Yes, hello.
Hi, you are listening to this, or you are live on the Secret Teachings right now. You just called in, correct?
Yes, I did.
And your first name?
Chris.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
I'm fine. I was listening with great interest.
Hi, Chris.
And yes, and I was wondering the scientific evidence for this happening. Right. How do we know a planet blew up? Or, I mean, the asteroid belt, there are people who say, yes, that was a planet that blew up, and for the longest time that was the theory. But is there other evidence? Like, I think Mars shows evidence it was once a moon of a larger planet. And that's scientific evidence that there was another planet.
Sorry, could you repeat that last?
I said, well, the moon, Mars itself is not symmetrical the same way our moon is not symmetrical, and it shows that it was once a moon of a larger planet. But there is no other larger planet near Mars' orbit, so there must have been one that blew up. That's part of the scientific evidence that there was, and that Mars, in fact, was in orbit around this other planet that blew up.
So what you're saying, Chris, what you're asking Don, is that Mars perhaps was a moonlet, if you will, of Maldek. Perhaps that's more evidence.
Yes.
Don,
that's
what do you
right.
think?
I think Tom Van Flandern had that theory, and I'm wondering if he's aware of this evidence that Mars used to be a moon of Maldek.
I do not subscribe to that, Chris. Maldek supposedly had a moon of its own. Malona was what it was called. Maldek was a much larger planet than Mars, and Mars appears to have had a stable orbit for a substantial amount of time, long before the 700,000 BC destruction of Maldek. So I don't really subscribe to Mars being a moon, a dislocated moon from a larger planet, spun off from a larger planet. Number two, most cosmologists that don't accept that the asteroid belt was ever a planet refer to it as non-coalesced waste from the creation of our solar system, the material expelled by our sun, which is the normal process in the creation of a solar system. Its central sun expels excess material, which then becomes the satellites, planets, asteroids, comets, in many cases, of that particular solar system. But it is a knowledgeable fact that there was a coalescence of the material spent material from the sun, the excess material from the sun. So it at one time, in other words, there was a body there. It was a coalesced body that did explode. So I'm sticking with my original theory that it was a normal fifth planet in our solar system that exploded. Mars was the fourth, very stable planet. Did that actually answer your question, Chris, or did you have
there's the one
a different take on that?
That sort of addresses it because the other theory of Mars is that it wasn't a moon, but there was a blast wave of debris that just coated half of Mars, and then that made it more asymmetrical. So it may have been a blast wave from the planet exploding that hit it and made it covered with debris on one side, basically. So that's the other competing theory on Mars.
We do know that the blast wave from the destruction of Maldek did rip away a very significant portion of Mars' atmosphere, and it could have set up many different forces that would have impacted, altered the terrain of the planet from those excited forces from the destruction of Maldek. So that is a reasonable theory, Chris, and that one I could easily go along with, because we know for a fact that a portion of the atmosphere was stripped away, and it had other consequences associated with that blast. So there could have been topography changes in the planet at that incident, at that site of taking the direct impact. That makes a lot of sense, Chris.
It was very near to that planet being the next orbit over that it would just happen to get clobbered.
Precisely, exactly.
Well,
and a much smaller planet, so it has less ability to take that huge blast wave.
Very good.
Chris, do you have any other questions for Don tonight?
No, I don't. Not right now.
All right, well, get in touch with me, and I'll send you one of Don's books.
Thank you very much.
All right, you have a good night, Chris.
And thank you so much for listening, Chris.
You bet.
All right, bye-bye, Chris. All right, Don, we're going to take a short break, and when we
Take care, Chris.
When we come back, we'll expand on the Elder Gods theory. Just curious, what do you think we should get into next, Don?
I'm probably a bad person to ask on that, because I like to develop from the start and go all the way through, and we're hit and miss at this point. So really what perhaps something that stuck out with you just finished the book.
Yes.
Certain areas or concepts that you thought were very interesting. I'd love to pursue those further.
All right, that sounds like a good plan, and I know my mind just runs all over the place. I really enjoyed all of the books, and this fourth one really tied it together really well. Some questions I had I think were answered, and when we come back, I've got some more questions, and I will ask those, and we'll see if we can explore those a little bit. M. Don Shorn, our guest tonight, he's got book and physical copies. You can also find those on Amazon.com. I picked up the third book a couple of years ago when I first started getting into these subjects, maybe more than a couple of years ago, probably about 5 or 6. And Don knows that I started with the third book, The Gardens of the Elder Gods. And I thought it was really fascinating because there was so much information in it. It really just fed my craving for knowledge that wasn't necessarily, well, of course it wasn't talked about in conventional schooling, but it wasn't really something I saw, even on the History Channel. You don't really hear about stuff like this, even in those Ancient Alien shows, which really promulgates an assumptive belief in something that becomes a matter of faith, like most religious dogmas. And so I read that, and I contacted the publisher. They got me in contact with Don, our guest tonight, who's still on the line. And they were nice enough. He was nice enough to contact them, send me the first two books. I read all of those, devoured them very quickly. I learned a lot, still had some questions. I found out Don was coming out with the fourth book. He was nice enough to send that to me. I've got a copy of that. Just finished reading it today. And it's really just, I think it's revolutionary in this field. I keep saying that because I do this all of the time, almost 24 hours a day. If I was awake 24 hours a day, let's say 17, 18 hours a day, I'm constantly involved in this type of research, thinking, writing, reading. And these books are just a wealth of information. We've given away the 3 copies tonight, but if you would like to find a copy of his works, again, you can go to our website, thesecretteachings.info, find his website, find the publisher page. You can also find Amazon.com. Of course, on our website, thesecretteachings.info, please, if you have the means, help support this broadcast and donate at the top right of the page. You'll see a flashing arrow. Any donations over $25 tonight, and I'll send you a digital copy of all 3 of my books as well. So a lot of knowledge, a lot of information being given out tonight. And I hope everyone is enjoying the broadcast. M. Don Shorn, our guest, he is on the line with us right now. Don, I know you like to go in a concise order, and I try to stick to that, although you know much more about this than I do, so my mind starts to wonder, and I want to ask all of these questions. But I think maybe where we can sort of go back to is when you started talking about the genetic modification of man, or the precursor to modern man with this outer planetary human-like species, or these human-like beings. So after the genetic modification, from my understanding, there arose, or it was in the process of happening, a division amongst these beings living on Mars. They became discontent with this more advanced, one of the original 7 races, the ancient ones, and they kind of created this conflict where they split into 2 different sects, one aligning with the ancient ones, and then one that kind of became a rogue planet in a way. Does that make sense? Maybe you can talk on that point.
I sure will. In fact, we think much alike. That was going to be my recommendation on where we go.
Excellent.
To start that conversation, though, let me apologize to your audience. I don't feel as though I have presented the Elder Gods theory in a very concise manner so far, and I do apologize. Basically, the extent of the information is so voluminous, as you know, having read all 4 of the books on Orion, that I do want to assure your audience, as bad as I am at public speaking, I am a little better writer, and the material does actually flow in the books and make a lot more sense. And so I apologize for the hit and miss on the presentation this evening. To get back to the topic that we're talking about, take it one step back from just to tie up loose ends. The success with the 43,000 BC introduction of Cro-Magnon man, there was one last tweak that the ancient ones did with the recombinant DNA, combining earthly and outer planet DNA in this genetic engineering work, and that was the final tweaking of fully modern man, us, if you will, around 11,600 BC. And basically it was just very small modifications and refinements, much of it to do with our jaw and mouth, to be able to make a greater array of sounds for and more extensive vocabulary. And all the at that time, the recombinant species of the outer planet race pretty much wrapped up at that same time. And they ended up being a somewhat smaller stature, but quite like their old human-like race. In other words, they weren't made into something else. They were merely refined to be able for dual habitation on both Mars and Earth if they were ever allowed to be here. And that brings us to your point that you were getting at, and that was the schism, if you will, caused by the Great Flood. The Great Flood on Earth took place around 10,500 BC, requiring the ancient ones to take DNA specimens of plant life, fauna and flora, and exit Earth, if you will, prior to the Great Flood and the devastation that occurred thereafter. And with that species vacuum, by the way, the ancient ones took a few live specimens, human specimens, along with the salvaged DNA seed, if you will, of most of life on Earth to an old base on the moon, and to wait out the effects of the Great Flood. With the species vacuum then existing on planet Earth, one of the earlier mentioned cosmic order mandates that the indigenous species held sway over their own planet, excluding external life, no longer existed with the species vacuum on Earth. So the survivors of the human-like outer planet race still on Mars petitioned the ancient ones after the flood to be brought to Earth and basically take over our planet. And for whatever reason, the ancient ones denied that request, and that set in motion the start of an actual schism, if you will, the hatred by the outer planet human-like race towards the humans that they considered much below them, and as well as the ancient ones then for denying them their request to relocate to Earth. That simmering discontent on the Martian base finally led to an all-out schism on the planet where the remaining survivors basically were given a vote to either stay with the ancient ones and abide by the cosmic order mandate and leave Mars, or stay with break away from the ancient ones and stay with their own race, but become an independent entity on Mars, so they could colonize Earth on their own if they could make it here. And the votes were taken, and there was a split in the outer planet human-like species race into two different groups. The dissenters that I refer to in the theory and throughout the books as the BOPH inhabitants, the breakaway outer planet human-like inhabitants, and the lunar Petrus, the, if you will, good outer planet human-like race that chose to stay with the ancient ones and be relocated to the moon of Earth once after the vote and the schism or split took place, and they would then be with the few salvaged humans brought to the moon before the Great Flood, and there they would await their relocation to Earth later after the floodwaters subsided and so forth. And that caused the split ban of the outer planet human-like beings. Much later, the dissenting BOPH inhabitants on Mars ended up annihilating the entire lunar Petrus good outer planet race that had been relocated to Mars, that were the loyal that remained loyal to the Ancient Ones. They were later annihilated in a raid on the moon. That set up the ability for the BOPH, the breakaway outer planet human-like beings, to attempt colonization of Earth on their own. Unfortunately, or fortunately for us, it took longer than they had expected, and that led us then to that roughly 5400 BC time frame when they finally made their first trip on their own to colonize Earth.
Now, initially, from my understanding, when you present this in the book and talk about it in the new book, History of the Elder Gods, so after this happens, the BOPH, the outer planetary human-like beings, they come to Earth. Initially, from what you propose, this was not really an invasion as much as it was a mild form of colonization, perhaps. And then later on, when some of...
That is...
Go ahead.
No, that is exactly what it was. It was basically just a small scout party to start with, and it was for the intent of setting up a flow from Mars to colonize Earth, and that's precisely what they attempted to do. And this is where some of Sitchin's concept of the 12th planet, or presented in his Earth Chronicles, comes into play. He goes into a richer story, if you will, utilizing the various myths, the Near Eastern myths, to tell his story. But again, the Anunnaki, the Igigi, the aliens that Sitchin referred to in his writings are the BOPH colonists that arrived here. Sitchin never addresses the Ancient Ones in any of his writings or work, but they're one and the same. That initial scout party, their intent was to get the loyalty of the human populace behind them, because they were offering an easier path, if you will, going back to our discussions earlier regarding the aspect of helping an emerging race by the Ancient Ones by metering all of the advancements, the knowledge that was taught, and so forth, as mentioned earlier, was predicated upon the moral maturity, if you will, the enlightenment of the particular civilization that they were assisting. With the onset of the BOPH colonists on Earth, they were offering the humans, under their tutelage, no restraints. They were offering them their higher advanced technology that they brought from Mars with them, and a quicker advancements towards riches, better life, etc., by following the BOPH colonists, rather than continuing to allow the ancient ones to educate, civilize, and impart sparse knowledge where moral maturity existed. It was just a much quicker path towards riches and success, seemingly offered by the BOPH colonists to the humans of Earth.
Don, if I may,
that started the Dillman. Go ahead, Ryan.
Just one very quick injection here, because I know some people wanted me to inject this into the conversation, and you can answer this very, very quickly if you need. When we talk about these BOPH beings offering a form of instant gratification, an easy pathway to technological development as opposed to moral maturity and growing spiritually to understand the consequences of your actions, that reminds me and some other listeners of the story of the Garden of Eden and perhaps the serpent and the tree of good and evil. Is there any connection to your work in that? Again, if you want to just brief that and then continue on what you were discussing.
Almost every earthly myth revolves around the ancient aliens, be it the BOPH colonists that later became the BOPH gods, the gods of ancient the ancient Near East in particular, or the ancient ones themselves. In the Garden of Eden is just a perfect example of the later, what I refer to as the eradication plan, enacted by the, again, later BOPH gods rather than the BOPH colonists, that it was a degradation of the ancient ones, and that's where we had talked before tonight, Ryan, about the serpent symbol that shows up as a symbol of wisdom and ancient knowledge throughout most ancient texts and sacred records, and it was the symbol of the ancient ones, and that symbol ended up being degraded,
Yes.
altered, changed, eradicated by the later BOPH gods to demean the ancient ones. We hadn't gotten into the exile per se yet, but it's for their return that the BOPH beings want humanity to always have a negative impression of the ancient ones. When they return, we will be offered either to reconnect with them, the ancient ones, and restart our educational, civilizing, metered progress and growth status once again, or reject them, which will force them to leave our planet forever and be under the control then of what we now know as the hidden BOPH, behind the scenes power brokers. Once they disappeared from the earthly myths of the ancient Near East and later blended into society, taking over positions of power throughout our world. I probably jumped ahead too much on that, but most all of the myths truly do have a basis in either a direct connection with the ancient ones or the BOPH colonists, gods, power brokers.
So now going back to before I derailed you there for a moment, we had been talking about prior to what you call the exile of the ancient ones from Earth. Maybe you could continue to explain what led up to that, and we'll just see where it goes from there. We do have some listener questions I'll propose to you in the final segment tonight. But if you'd like to continue there, Don, what led up to the exile of the Ancient Ones, and what happened when the BOPH gods first came to Earth? Again, it wasn't really an invasion, but more of a colonization. Later, that turned semi-hostile, and they created, as I understand, a form of hierarchy, perhaps the church, political orders, different nation states, even, to sort of divide humanity and prevent them from coming together as one. I don't know if I'm on target, if I'm jumping ahead, but maybe you can address that and continue on with what you had been discussing.
You're right on target. Exactly the case, Ryan. We'll go back to the aspect of that small, if you will, scout party arriving in the 5400 BC time frame that I indicated. They were starting to offer humanity the quick path towards riches and success and so forth. And I had mentioned that they had, as more and more colonists arrived from Mars,